Welcome back, everyone. This is our spoiler review of My Perfect Stranger. And so we're going to get right into it. Let's jump right in. Now, who was the murderer?
Who was the murderer?
Who was the murderer in the end? Who was it?
It was a shocker.
I would agree. It was definitely a shocker.
So it was his dad.
It was the father.
Yeah.
It was the father. The
Crazy.
entire time you thought this guy, he was so nice and, fixing the car and trying to fix the time machine to get it back. But in the end, it was the father who was the murderer. And it was definitely a shock to, the main lead actor who, he wasn't suspecting him the entire time. But who did you think it was throughout the whole series?
Okay,
Who do you think was the murderer?
I mean, the beauty of the show is that you go back and forth in your mind, like all over the place, about who you think it is. I mean, from one episode to the next, I was like, I think it's this person. I was like, oh no, it's this person. Oh no, it's not. It's this person.
Almost every character that gets a little bit of screen
is suspected.
Time, you're like, all right, this guy's definitely the murderer, or this girl is definitely the murderer.
Yeah, which was one of the beauties of the show, because when I found out it was a murder mystery at the beginning, and I was like, how are they going to drag this out for 16 episodes without you just being like, it's that person, you know? But they really did, like, you had no idea, and you kept thinking, oh, it's this person, for sure, or it's this person.
Yeah, that's the problem, though. I would say, like, the problem with most murder mysteries is that you can almost guess who it is and figure it out within the first either episode or first 30 minutes of watching the movie. But they did an awesome job of just kind of keeping you guessing throughout, keeping you on your toes.
So I would say for the person who I most consistently suspected was Komisuk, which was
Komisuk.
Yeah, Komisuk. So she was the novelist at the beginning who the girl worked for, and she of course we end up figuring out that her first novel that made her famous she stole from the girl's mom.
Yes.
Wasn't even her own novel. So she was the one that I most consistently was like, oh, there's just so many things that point to her. Yeah. At the beginning when she's first introducing her novel at the very beginning, and she's like, it's not only men who can commit terrible murders, women can too. And I was like, okay, these are things that I've like experienced firsthand or whatever. But sometimes it almost seemed too obvious. I was like, is it her, or is that just too obvious?
Yeah, that was the thing for me. It was almost too obvious that it was almost like lending itself for everybody to believe that it was her, because it was kind of like she was the antagonist throughout.
She was so creepy, like
the whole series, that you're just like, this it can't be her, because it would be almost too obvious. So that's why I thought it was the father's friend with the glasses. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was him throughout. Yeah. Throughout the show, I guess episodes 3, 4, 5, and 6, he was always acting a little suspect, and
they would have these shots where they would go up to their eyes, and you'd be like, it's them, but then
he's hiding stuff in the bathroom, and then he's lying about certain things, and then he's going to the inn with the
and he
lady.
Almost seemed like too happy and silly, where you're like, okay, maybe it's this guy, you know.
He'd be laughing, and all of a sudden, like, just pan to him, or like you'd have a close shot of him, and then he's all serious. He's like, and you're like, all right, this guy is he's definitely the murderer. But yeah, we were both wrong. Wrong. So Komisuk and the father's friend were not the murderers. It was actually the father who was the murderer his father was the murderer. So there were some suspenseful, intense scenes. What would you say were some of the more intense?
Some intense moments.
Yeah.
So there were so many kind of intense moments. I would say somewhere like I legitimately felt so intense, like kind of want to hide under the covers. One moment was when, after Sunai, the girl's mom, is abducted by the murderer and almost killed, and Haijun saves her and ends up getting falsely arrested, which was an intense moment in and of itself as well, because he's standing there and he's standing over the body, the guy with the glasses, who gave his life for her, which was amazing. And Dong-sik, who's the detective, he realizes is actually a really good guy, even though he's very, like, suspectful.
Flawed.
Sees him there and just assumes, like, you're the murderer because you're here at the site of the murder, and so he arrests him. Well, it goes back to the hospital scene, and her mom wakes up and confirms that it wasn't him, and he goes and visits her. So the moment that was super intense for me was she's talking about, oh, all these people came into the hospital room to visit me. You know, there was a huge crowd of people, and, you know, it was great and everything. And he looks over and he sees the Bong Bong Tea House little matchbox, and he's kind of looking at it like, okay, the murderer was here, you know, in the room. I don't know. I just felt so, like, like, intense in that moment. That was a tense moment for me. What about you?
Yeah, it was intense. I would agree. For me, I would say the most intense moment was when he finally found out, or we found out as the audience, that it was the father. Yeah, Hae-jun's dad. When we actually found out as an audience that it was Hae-jun's dad, that he was the actual murderer.
Yes, like when he's walking down the road. I was like,
when he's walking down the road, and then the mother comes to Hae-jun. Hae-jun's mother comes to him, and she tells him, because actually they're dating at the time, and she reveals that it was actually, you know, her boyfriend, or her, you know, his future father was the murderer. And you know, it was at night, and it was just them talking, and then all of a sudden you see the father kind of walking down this dark alleyway, like coming to the house. And it was definitely intense.
It was a great way to reveal it, because she shows up, like, before you even see him, she shows up. And whenever his mom shows up, you know, you're like, his dad is the murderer. And so it was kind of cool the way they revealed it in a, like a roundabout way.
Yeah. She's like, you don't know this entire time?
You don't know who he is?
You know, the person that's been in your house working on the time machine.
And the look on his face, he's just kind of like, I felt so for him in that moment. It's like, after all of this, to figure out, you know, it's like, yes, you're so excited. This whole time he's been wanting to find the murderer, and he would be so excited to find out who it is. And yet, when he finds out, it's like the worst news imaginable. It's like, it's in your someone in your family.
Yeah,
you know?
And not only that, but you find out that his father actually kills him. He murders him in 2021. In the future, he murders him. And that's why he's going back in times to stop the serial killer. But he doesn't,
he doesn't know he's stopping his dad.
He doesn't know he's stopping his dad.
Yeah.
And, you know, the big reveal, towards the end, I started to guess, it could be the father, but I mean, that would be so horrible and so, you know, difficult for, you know, Hae-jun, but yeah.
Kind of like the girl said, remember when they were in the waiting room? She was like, you know, we're so happy, we've been so happy we finally achieved what we set out to achieve, which is to find out, to apprehend the murderer, and yet I feel so terrible for him because, like, now his life is, like, upside down because they found out who it was, and it was his dad. So another tense moment was obviously, like, when his dad, you know, that was crazy when he revealed who he was in order to draw out the murderer in the first place. And, you know, she sees him doing that. He's basically saying, I saw your face, even though he didn't really see the murderer's face. He says it in order to draw the murderer to him, like basically putting himself out as bait, which is true. Like, I've heard it said, one of the things about, you know, criminals or murderers, you know, they're very guilty. They feel very guilty, and so they're very fearful. And one way to draw them out is to play upon their fear, and they'll eventually do something that will expose themselves. Which makes me think of the Bible verse, you know, the wicked flee when no one is chasing them.
Yeah.
I think that's a proverb. And it's so true. It's because that guilt, like, they know that they're in the wrong. It's like when Adam and Eve hid in the garden, and God said, why are you hiding? You know, all of a sudden they felt their nakedness. He's like, who told you were naked? Well, it's the same. It's like, you know, and it's like Hae-jun knew that. He knew that, like, this murderer would be fearful now. And so he says, I saw his face, in order to draw him out. But that was so intense because then you knew, like, he's coming after him.
Yeah. And
the moment where he's beating him up, you're like, it's his dad.
Yeah.
Like, his dad is beating him up. I felt so bad for him. You know, his dad,
realizing that this is his son that he's actually beating up and trying to kill.
He doesn't even know it. It's crazy.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to the Christian perspective.
Yeah, just talking about a few things that, you know, we could talk about a little bit deeper that were good themes, interesting, thought-provoking things that we found in the drama.
What would you say, babe?
So, I think, well, one thing I'll say about it is that the drama, like a lot of their dramas, not all of them, but it was pretty clean, and as far as, there was no sexual content at all. It was pretty pure and clean. But I will say it was dark in certain ways because there were characters who were evil, and there were characters who were twisted and who kind of did dark things, and there were characters who were kind of disturbed. But the thing about the drama is it always portrayed those characters as having issues and as being, having problems and not being
They didn't glorify.
It didn't glorify it in any
evil.
way.
Yeah.
Even like some of the characters, like that one girl who was kind of had some issues.
Yeah.
It was never like seen like, oh, this is a great thing. It was just, we sympathize with them, but they have issues. And so that's something to be aware of, especially for younger children maybe, that there are some dark moments and there's some dark characters in the story, but it's always portrayed as, it's the good characters that are brought to light and that are glorified, and there's some really good characters to root for, heroic characters to root for.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say one of the things that I really appreciate about it in terms of the Christian perspective is just the, obviously God's command to honor our parents and to respect our parents and to love our parents. I think that was a major theme throughout the entire series. I mean, you go back to Yoon Young and her relationship with her parents, in the present day, and this is not before they go back in time, but she has no respect for her mom. She thinks her mom is just kind of like this kind of deadbeat kind of woman that's living in the past, and she's
very disrespectful
she's
to her.
Out of date. And there's a scene early on in the movie where she's at the mall and she's buying these this is the mother, she's buying these shoes for her daughter, but her daughter's like embarrassed to even be associated with her. And it kind of crushes you in a way where I could never see myself doing that to my parents, but this is kind of where how her family life was for a long time. It's not like her mom did anything egregious, but with her father and her mother going back and forth, and the difficult dysfunction that they had in their relationship, it kind of rubbed off on Yoon Young, and so she had little respect for her mother. And you see that when they go back in time, Yoon Young really appreciates. She learns to appreciate her mom and her, where she came from, and she wasn't always like the way she is in the future. She's just this innocent girl who's shy, and so it's very redeeming, in terms of the relationship between child and parents, and especially with her and her father too. Like, she just had the worst opinion of her father growing up, because her father would always just kind of leave them, or just get into alcohol problems or whatever. But you go back in time, you actually see that he's a sweet guy, just born in a difficult circumstance.
Honestly, that was like one of the most moving parts of it to me, was seeing the relationship with her father, seeing her father, who you kind of see as this very kind of despicable, unlikable character at the beginning, because that's the way she sees him, and you see him through her eyes. But she goes back in time and realizes all of the things that made him the way he was. And he really was a really sweet guy, but he went through so much, and that's what made him have all these issues later in life. And I feel like it was really powerful to me. It really hit me, when thinking about people, to think about the things that they've gone through. Sometimes we can just judge people based on our personal feeling. Like, I don't like the way that you make me feel, or something. And also too, I loved how it made you think about your parents. Like, sometimes we can selfishly, as children, we can be so selfish, or we can almost think of our parents exist for us, to meet our needs. I think as you get older, you start to grow to see your parents as people apart from you. And I loved how she was able to see who her parents were before she was even born. And I thought, like, watching it, I was like, oh, that'd be so cool to be able to go back in time and to see my parents not just as parents or through the lens of parents, but to understand them more as people and who were they before, they had me. What were their dreams? What were their aspirations? And just how much they sacrificed for me.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most powerful parts of this story that I thought.
Yeah. I thought it was probably the best part of the entire story. Just the whole dynamic of
and the relationship between
children
her parents.
and parents, her parents, and even him and his mother as well, and even the one girl that she's kind of troubled. She's been raised by a single mom, and she's just trying to do everything that she can to keep her. Keep her afloat and support her. And then you see in the future, what would happen, because the young girl actually, she thinks about committing suicide, and what that future would be like if she commits suicide, and the mom is just kind of out there just like searching for her daughter. Yeah. And she gets to appreciate her mom in an even a greater way, like how much she loves her.
I honestly think that was the most powerful part of it. Yeah. It's like seeing your parents and understanding them.
How much they love you. And,
Another part I thought was really interesting that made me think was the character, her father's friend who had the glasses, the kind of silly character. How his character was kind of redeemed, I thought was really cool. Because of course, he was really kind of a terrible character. I mean, he tried to lure her mom and to have sexual relations with her. Tried to kind of force her to do that with him. And then later he just felt so remorseful and so terrible, almost to the point of like despair about it. Yeah. And his friend, who was obviously really mad at him, also kind of had pity on him and said, hey, you don't have to be this person. Like, you can change the course of your life starting now. Yeah. And he ended up actually sacrificing his life for this girl that he had, been so terrible to. He ended up going and, trying to, and rescued her. Really, she was alive because of him, because he rescued her from the murderer, and the murderer ended up killing him. And I thought that was so, like, powerful. Like, wow, like a sin that's in our eyes seems so unforgivable, like how it can be redeemed, and from a Christian perspective, like, that redemption happens through Christ. And it reminds me of, like, you think about even the Apostle Paul and all the terrible things that he did. I mean, he was a murderer before God saved him, and then God used him so powerfully. And it's important for us as Christians not to dwell on our past or let our past become who we are, to remember that we are in Christ now and move forward. And I think that was kind of a cool example of that, where he moved forward and he ended up doing this heroic, sacrificial thing. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Kind of like Boromir in Lord of the Rings. He dies in the end.
Another thing from the Christian perspective that I wanted to touch on was a theme about forgiveness. I thought that that was a major theme towards the end of the drama. Like, I loved how Hai Jun forgave his grandfather. Yes. For everything that kind of happened, that he knew that his father had murdered these people, and that he was covering it up, and which was an egregious thing, but the grandfather was actually looking out for him in his future. Not to say that you can't justify those things, and obviously that was sinful and it was evil what he did, but Hai Jun, he wants to seek out reconciliation with his grandfather, and he forgives him for what he did, and he wants to bring that back into a relationship with him, which I thought was cool. And
that was a powerful moment.
Yeah. And I also thought Yoon Young she forgives Kumin Suk, towards the end. Yeah. Kumin Suk, that she did a lot of evil stuff, and she witnessed actually the murderer, and she knew who the murderer was, but she could have stopped future murders if she had
told who the murderer was.
Now, the thing of it is that both the grandfather and Kumisuk did horrible things, but they also repented, and they also asked for forgiveness and admitted that what they did was evil and what they did was sinful. And both those people were able to forgive them. And that's kind of how, that's the Christian perspective, is that, when we do something sinful, we repent to God, and, he forgives us in Christ. And we forgive one another, as we ask for repentance. So I really thought that was a major theme, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, towards the end.
Yeah,
it was good. Yeah. One other thing that was kind of cool about it was the romance was so innocent and sweet.
Yeah.
They didn't even kiss at all.
No. Throughout. It was pure,
it was kind of crazy.
Innocent. Yeah.
It was very innocent and pure. Just like a very sweet, part of the show.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
Both romances between the father and the mom was very, very innocent. And then also
so cute, adorable.
The both leads were just, it was just very innocent.
Sweet.
They would hug and they would embrace each other, but it would never get beyond that point. And but you knew kind of they had feelings for one another, and which it's kind of refreshing in this day and age to watch.
Yeah.
A romance that doesn't have to
so innocent,
have
sweet.
all that. Sexual content.
Yeah.
So, very cool.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so what were some standout characters for you?
Standout characters. I would say Kumisuk was probably the most powerful character in the show. Obviously, she was the evil woman, and back in time, she was the evil kind of girl that was being abused by her older brother, but she obviously knew who the murderer was.
Yeah.
And throughout the story, she was just
had an aura about her.
Yeah, she did.
Like a kind of.
She just did a great job of kind of portraying this troubled girl, but she was very sinister, very calculating, very manipulative,
very intriguing actress.
Yes.
And the way she played it was very intriguing.
Like she wouldn't.
Yeah.
She didn't say a whole lot. She would just kind of look, and she would have these different looks and glances, and her facial expressions kind of said more about what she was thinking. Like you kind of knew what she was thinking just by looking at her.
Yeah.
She just had a presence about her that was really powerful, and even the way she spoke her lines were very powerful in the way she delivered them, and very methodical.
Yeah.
The whole thing. So I thought that she was a standout character.
Yeah, I would say that I felt like in this drama the girls were standouts. Not that the guys weren't good, but I felt like the girls just were really good. Like, the main girl, Kumisuk, was really good. Her mother was absolutely adorable. Yeah. They were just very they're what drew me into it, were the girl characters. But that being said, her dad as a young guy was just such a cute character.
Yeah.
At first, he was such kind of a dork. I was like, who is this guy, But he ended up being just adorable, and your heart went out to him, and his sweet innocent love with her mom was so sweet. So he kind of stood out to me. He's one that I really think about when I think about the show. I feel like he was kind of a standout guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he was a cool character. He was quirky, kind of dorky, but he kind of made it cool. And he was all.
He did such a good
nice
job too.
Yeah.
He didn't try to play it cool. He was just crazy guy, you know. It was good.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did you think? About the ending? How it ended?
The ending, I thought they did a admirable job with the ending, considering that you're dealing with time travel and you have to tie in loose ends, and because they changed their past, that would obviously affect their future. Their future was going to change, and how is that going to look? And I would have liked it if they had a little bit more detail on the things that happened in the future.
Yeah.
And how that impacted
certain,
their
her
life.
grandma, her grandparents, they never showed them in the future. I would have liked to have seen how are they doing.
Yeah.
Certain people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would have liked for her parents to realize that it was her.
Yeah, I kind of wanted that to happen too.
Yeah. It was almost like they were oblivious that it was their daughter that actually went back in time and changed their fate. I thought that would have been a cool kind of dynamic, in the future. And, but
they realize you were actually there in the past, you know, but they don't. They're just like, you look just like our best friend, when we were young.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like, I mean, the scene where she's in her home and she sees like her dad walking down the stairs, his leg is perfectly healed, and she sees her loving family. That was so emotional. Like I felt like crying, and I don't always feel that way, even like in emotional, scenes. But it was very deeply emotional to me. I felt very emotional about it. Yeah. So it was really sweet. It was very satisfying after such a turbulent, so much turbulence. It was so satisfying to see that. It's sad that Hae-jun, the guy, that his mom, still abandoned him. That was sad. But I think it added an element of reality. Yeah. Otherwise, it would have been too, like, perfect. Like, everything turned out perfect. But it made it feel more grounded in reality, that sometimes not everything's that's just how it's going to be. There was nothing that was going to fix that. The fact that his mom just couldn't get over the fact that his dad was a murderer, and she had to give her child away, and there was nothing that could change that. So I felt like it added realism to it. So it was okay.
Yeah.
What about the what do you think they were doing in the end when they were like walking on the beach and then they got in the car?
Yeah.
They didn't really explain exactly what they were doing, but what do you think they were doing there?
Well, they were I believe they were trying to change. I think they were going to go back in time to make everything right this time. That's what they said. Yeah. Towards the end, they said, okay, we got one chance to go back in time and to make it right. Meaning that, there were some people in the past during that time that got murdered.
Yeah.
And so I think
they weren't able to prevent a couple of the murders.
So he says that we have a round trip. We have one round trip left in the time machine. Let's go back and let's just make everything right this time. Let's make everything perfect. So I think that's what they were doing. They were going to try to go back and prevent those murders from happening. Which
was good, but at the same time I was like, okay, but if you do that, then you might not meet your grandfather in the same way. Like, a lot of other things will change. But those are it's one of those times where you have to say, it's a crazy time travel movie. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
Leave it as is.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Many people say, well, why wouldn't you go back in the why wouldn't you go back in the time machine and try to prevent those murders from happening?
So it would have been like a issue with the plot, because everyone would have said that. So I think they just wanted to tie up that loose end. Yeah. There at the end.
Yeah. Would you have liked to seen them get married at the end?
I don't think it was necessary. I think their romance wasn't like. It was a part of it, but it wasn't such a huge part of it that it needed to end in a wedding. Yeah. I think the fact that you see their son, because their son goes back in time, and he meets their son. Yeah. The fact that you see him is confirmation, like, oh, they're gonna live a happy life. They're gonna have a child together. Yes. So I thought that was good enough. It was.
And I'm glad that you brought that up. I thought that was one of the best reveals. Why was the time machine there in the very beginning? Yeah. The time machine was there because his future son was sending that time machine back during that time so that he can make his past right. Yeah. I thought that was very cool, how they just didn't leave it. Sometimes you have these time travel, movies or shows, and you get no explanation for why they went back in time or why this happened. But they actually explained, like, it was his son, so that he can kind of go back and take care of some past issues. I thought, and obviously the future murder. So I thought that was cool the way they tied that in. Yeah. All right. Well, with that being said, I think that's enough spoiler review for you, and
hope you guys enjoyed it like we did. Please comment. We love hearing like what you thought of it. If you agree with us, if you disagree, it's fun to like interact together. So if you want to subscribe. Please subscribe to us and join us for more discussions. We would love to discuss with you.
Yeah. And we want to know who you thought the murderer was. We want to know, did you like the ending of it? Would you have liked to seen a different ending? So please comment below, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next adventure.
Bye.